Since the deadly clash in Charlottesville, the debate over Confederate statues across the country has been reignited. Multiple statues have been taken down or now are scheduled to be taken down. That includes the removal of a statue in Annapolis at the Maryland state capitol. We want to know what you think. Do you think all the Confederate statues need to be removed? Vote right now on the WSA 9 app or on WSA9.com/vote. You see the poll there at the bottom of your screen. We'll be sharing that with you here throughout the show, and we'll pay it off before the end of the show. So we wanted to take the controversial statues in our area, one of them, and dig a little deeper on it with you tonight. So we decided to take a look at the statue of Albert Pike, who was a Confederate general, a brigadier general. The statue sits near the 4th Street Northwest exit of the Judiciary Square Metro stop. And I'm joined by Adam Rothman now, who's a professor in the history department at Georgetown University. So Albert Pike is an interesting individual. He was a brigadier general in the Confederate Army, but over the course of his life, being a Confederate general is not what defined him. In fact, the statue that's there isn't meant to honor him as any part of the Confederacy. Tell us a little more about him.
Yeah, that's correct. He's sort of a wild kind of character, sort of on the Confederate general D list, I think. But he's an interesting guy. He was actually born in Boston and was just well educated as a kid, but decided Boston wasn't for him, so he moved out to what was then really the wilds of Arkansas in the 1820s and 1830s, and he became a kind of man of letters out on the southern frontier, a poet, a lawyer, but also ultimately in the late 1850s, a defender of Confederate secession and of slavery. In the Civil War, he becomes a brigadier general, but his main role actually is as a Confederate emissary to the Indians in what is today Oklahoma.
And from what I read, he did a horrible job as a Confederate general.
Yeah, he does a pretty bad job.
Yeah.
He actually gets accused of allowing the Indians under his command to scalp Yankee soldiers, and ultimately resigns from the Army in the middle of the war and sort of retreats to his cabin in Arkansas.
Right, and then so after that he becomes this prominent Freemason, and that's why he is remembered here. So I'm interested to know, the statue went up, if I'm not mistaken, in 1901.
Correct.
So would there have been any discussion around that time of, hey, this guy was a general in the Confederate Army, maybe we shouldn't put up a statue of him in the nation's capital?
Yeah, it's funny, if you go back and read the speeches around the dedication of the memorial, they're very apologetic about his career as a Confederate general, and they're quick to say that the statue is being erected despite the fact that he was a Confederate general, not because of it. So they sort of downplay that aspect of his career. But
that attitude isn't really helping today, is it?
Probably
that
not.
Sentiment, no.
Yeah.
I want to bring up something that President Trump had to say in his press conference today about comparing these statues to, say, the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. We're going to listen to that real quick.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down? Excuse me. Are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do.
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue because he was a major slave owner?
Goes on to basically say, where do we draw the line? How far is too far? So I wonder, as a historian, is this a moment that we see in history from different civilizations where there comes a point in time where they just wipe off what they found to be unpalatable in the past?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of societies have done that. They've decided aspects of their history they don't want to remember, they don't want to confront. But I think in our society, which is a democratic society, we can have a public debate about what our landscape of memory should look like. Do we want Albert Pike standing in front of the federal courthouse in Judiciary Square? Or should he be moved maybe to the Masonic Temple and somebody like Thurgood Marshall put in that spot? Maybe Marshall would be in a more appropriate statue for that location. Yeah. We draw lines all the time, and this is a moment where there's a greater consciousness of this landscape of memory and the need to be a bit more discerning and judgmental about who occupies it.
Yeah, it does seem to be that this sweeping ideology just spreading across about these Confederate monuments, and so you wonder at what point it will stop. Will it go on, as the president suggested, to affect people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? It seems that time will tell. Professor, thanks so much for coming on and giving us your perspective tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here.